All right. Thank you so much, team. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of those around the globe. Welcome to the NGO CSW 68. Dignified Menstruation is integral to the elimination of sexual and gender-based violence. My name is Mili Adhikari. Currently, I'm a third-year medical student at University of California in Davis and the director for Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation North America chapter. We are a international coalition of menstrual equity coalition fighting for dignified menstruation. And within medicine, I'm aspiring OBGYN and currently practice as a public health researcher, a global health activist invested in leading positive, sustainable transformations in sexual and reproductive health care, dignified menstruation, and my passion stems from my desires to alleviate the widespread social health inequities disproportionately impacting historically marginalized communities like our own and advance global equity and menstrual dignity. For this song, thank you so much for playing that. This is called Sanga Sangechu. It is in the Nepali language from the country of Nepal, which is the country of origin for Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. And we like to believe that English does not have to be the global language, and that we all do better when we learn the indigenous languages of our grassroots organizations, such as Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. And we invite anyone who would like to translate the song to your country's language to please contact us. And that is listed on the chat as well, via email, via DMs, or via Facebook messages. And so, as we are only a couple of days from the International Women's Day on March 8th, I would just like to wish all of us improper, loud, and revolutionary women happy International Women's Day. I believe that in the light of ongoing genocides in Palestine, Congo, Sudan, and many more, that may not be in the limelight, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all the menstruators in there who are fighting for their lives, children, country, and dignity. Devastating circumstances such as these, which are either man-made or natural disasters, only show us again and again that menstruators, which are defined as persons who have female reproductive body parts, such as a uterus, vagina, ovaries, are subjugated to additional layers of indignity simply due to their status as menstruators, on top of all the other layers of indignity and violence and discrimination that they may be facing during times of tribulations, compared to the non-menstruators who are defined as persons who have male reproductive body parts and may not have a menstrual cycle. I would like to also humbly request the audience to share your country, your name, and engage in the chat as we move on through the program. This will be a panel-style discussion, and this program is also being broadcasted on Dignified Menstruation Facebook pages. Please follow us there as well and reshare onto your own networks and your personal Facebook pages so we can build this awareness. And again, we are the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. Today, we have panelists who work alongside us, panelists who are our fellows. We have panelists who also work in adjunct to us in other organizations who are adopting our framework. And I want to not bid us any further time and for us to begin. So our first round, we will start with brief introductions from our three dynamic panelists. And so to our three panelists, I ask, could you please give us a brief introduction of yourself and what was your motivation to speak on this panel today within our theme of dignified menstruation is integral to the elimination of sexual and gender-based violence? And we'll start today with Samir.
Thank you so much, Mili. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Samir Pariyar, main champion for Dignified Menstruation, leading Dignified Menstruation campaign Nepal. Also, I am the member of Male Leader Network formed by Government of Nepal, Ministry of Women, Children and Senior Citizens to end gender-based violence in context of Nepal. And I am also currently studying Bachelor of Public Health with a full government scholarship in country Nepal. And I am motivated to address this panel today, focusing on the theme dignified menstruation is integral to eliminate of sexual and gender-based violence at CSW 6 days, based on my extensive 4-year commitment to dignified menstruation advocacy. Throughout this time, I have observed numerous initiatives and programs dedicated to eliminating violence against women. Though this experience, I have been identifying menstrual discrimination is a pivotal and often overlooked factor that significantly contributes to various forms of violence, discrimination, and human rights violation. Today, my aim is to bring the attention to the profound impact of menstrual discriminating, highlighting its crucial role in exacerbating broad issues of violence and gender-based discrimination. Additionally, I aspire to use this platform to urge United Nations to endorse dignified menstruation as a strategy to end all form of violence related to menstruation and encourage feminists to become ambassador of dignified menstruation in order to bring positive change and make up gender equality all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samir. Welcome. It is so important that we have non-menstruators who are a champion of dignified menstruation. And I applaud you for taking on that duty and also want to extend that to all non-menstruators who are listening to this program right now and who later on may watch our recordings, that we absolutely need non-menstruators because this is not only a feminine issue, it is not a woman's only issue. It is a multidimensional problem that is a human rights issue. And I really like that you brought out this, this want or this need to champion this to the international coalition levels, because that's what we need right now is, light on menstrual indignity and how we as both menstruators and non-menstruators need to, come together and be able to work on this issue. So thank you so much and welcome. Can't wait to hear more about the work that you've done and how we can continue to encourage our non-menstruators to become not just involved, but to lead as well. So thank you. Welcome. Next, we'll have Aniedi. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Aniedi Etim. I am a Nigerian activist. I advocate for girls' education. I am also an anti-human trafficking advocate. I began my work in 2017, and in 2022, I founded a nonprofit, Aniedi Etim Foundation, which was ultimately to raise awareness comprehensively on menstrual poverty and to also distribute free menstrual kits to girls in primary and secondary schools by way of intervention from shame and missing school and to during menstruation, and to also enable them experience menstruation with dignity, which is their fundamental human rights. And as to what motivated me to be here today, menstruation, dignified menstruation, which is a human rights issue, is my motivation at all times. And for those of us who are familiar with the power imbalance and patriarchy surrounding menstruation and how these constitutes to sexual and gender-based violence, I think that it is important that we lend our voices every now and then because it can make a difference. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you, Mili.
Thank you, Aniedi. Welcome. I think it's so powerful that you started your own organization at such a, a young activism age and to be able to really see the issues in society as they're appearing and to want to do something about it and take those steps itself, I know can be really challenging. And so I applaud you on that, and welcome to this platform so we can learn more about the things that you've done and things that you've learned through the Dignified Menstruation framework. I really liked the part where you kind of spoke about the shame aspect, even though, at that time you were, distributing menstrual kits and you saw it as a, a need for that because maybe there was not actual products, but then also connecting this idea that it wasn't just the products, it was this shame that they were feeling, so that they were not, going to school because of this reason. And I think often in the historic menstrual movement, and even this, really big charge that's happened, this big kind of emphasis on the menstrual movement, I think we've been stuck at the products. So, so I really like that you mentioned that part about shame. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hear more. And then last but not least, I'd like to ask Aisha if she wants to introduce. And then before that, I just wanted to mention that Ifran, who was a part of our panel originally, he was unable to join us today. There was some health issues, and so we wish him the best and the very well, and we'll see him for the next panel. Thank you. Thank you, Aisha. Please continue.
Hi, everybody. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. However you say hello in your language. I am Aisha Thapa. I am so excited to join everybody here today. So happy to see everybody. I am an avid advocate of dignified menstruation and human rights. I was motivated to speak here today because I strongly believe in the mission of further championing um, the idea of investing in dignified menstruation and accelerating progress. As we have seen in numerous situations around the world, investing in women, menstruators, and other historically marginalized groups helps accelerate the entire country's social welfare, health, mental care, you name it. There is a need to propel dignity in menstruation in a plethora of aspects that I've not only seen in my personal life growing up as a menstruator, but also through my work with GSCDM so far, and my work with nonprofits working with unhoused populations in the Kentucky/Ohio area. Menstruation, as Mili mentioned earlier, adds another layer of indignity faced by marginalized populations. And in providing menstrual aid and menstrual products to unhoused populations who menstruate, I noticed that although there were products, there wasn't really a talk about dignity and how this is really impacting, people who menstruate on top of being unhoused and facing all of those injustices. They are also facing the stigma and the shame that comes with menstruation almost tenfold because they are unhoused. So, yeah, I just want to bring awareness, bring my voice to that, and do what I can. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you for joining us. I really like that you connected, this want that you want to be for in this panel with the accelerate the process. And I think seeing that menstrual justice and dignity with menstruation will lead us to accelerate this idea of gender equity is so important, and something that, we're often told that change takes time, that, change is so hard to come and that it's very slow. But I think recognizing this idea that yes, it can take time because it's our, it's our mental status. However, we need to be able to, act urgently on this because lives are being lost, we're not being able to reach our full potential. And so it's, it's harming us now. And so we need the action now. So I really like how you mentioned that. Welcome to everyone. And so I think let's go ahead and move on to our second round. Thank you for those interactions. And before I pose the question, I'll just go ahead and set up that, we know that the history of menstrual discrimination dates back, for, so far in our civilization, really, maybe even with the beginning of what we consider to be our human civilized society. And the evidence is really apparent in all of our, religious texts, from Hinduism to Christianity to Islam to Judaism, condemning the menstrual blood as impure, dirty, and sinful, and implying that, people who menstruate are then sinners, right? Inferior beings to their opposite, which are people who don't menstruate. And these sort of misogynistic notions then translate into wider social beliefs, values, legislations, and actions around menstruation and the menstruator. So globally, from Global South Coalition Menstruation, we know through research that menstruation is a stigmatized condition globally and is defined as, abomination of the body, blemishes of the individual character, and really these tribal identities or social markers that are associated with a marginalized group. So I'd like to ask each one of you, could you tell us a little bit about the menstrual history and discrimination experienced in your local, national, and then the global context as you know it? And please mention any policies or actions that have taken so far in the scope of your practice. And what are some gaps that you've seen? And we'll start again with Samir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mili, for the question. In context of Nepal, I would like to share my experience. I'm working in local level. In local level, I have seen so many types of menstrual stigma. People are not allowed to enter to the kitchen, eat fruits, eat vegetable what they like, and also they are not allowed to go to the temple because they are seen as impure during the menstruation. On a bigger scale, I have noticed that even educated and powerful people in our country follow these rules, these practices. Uh, Practices thinking it's just a part of culture. Sadly, sometimes the people in charge who make policy, who implement the policy, and the people who are giving the justice also following the menstrual practices by saying that it is a culture. So people are following it as a rules of culture. Due to that, people are facing violence, abuses, and so many. And this is all due to the people's bad belief or unfairness. And while talking about the policy, in Nepal, so many policy have been made. For example, national health policy. There are altogether three national health policies for the welfare and health of the people. And right to safe motherhood and reproductive health Act 2018, child rights, CFLG, YFLG, child marriages. So many policies have been made till now. But this policy, there is despite of gap, they does not address the menstrual discrimination, which is the main causes of gender-based violence and sexual violence. As I have already working with the child club, child marriage is one of the high problem in Nepal. But while we are working for the child marriage policy and strategy does not address menstrual discrimination. So due to that, without without addressing menstrual discrimination, we cannot achieve the country free of child marriage, or country free of gender-based violence, or country free of sexual violence. So to address, we need a dignified menstruation, and we have to work on dignified menstruation. So without addressing that gap, we cannot achieve child-friendly local governance, youth-friendly local governance, women-friendly, and we cannot still achieve the human rights is a fundamental right. So altogether, we are in the country of Nepal. We have the God, Lord Buddha. We have so many things. Our constitution gives so lots of rights, but our constitution does not guarantee the menstrual discrimination as a form of violence, is a form of discrimination. So we need to address the menstrual discrimination in our constitution in every form of policy to make the free from the gender-based violence, to make a child-friendly local governance, to inner child rights, and to inner child-friendly municipality. So there are lots of gaps in the policy. So also in the global level, global feminists also not addressing the menstrual discrimination. So I would like to attend every feminist to address the menstrual discrimination as you are a real feminist. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. That was so concise. And I think I really like the part where you said, we're really missing the key thing, which is menstrual discrimination. I really like that you mentioned you've worked with so many different organizations trying to address, child marriage, which is a big, issue that a lot of, both in the local level, national and global, there's a lot of attention around it. But you're right. We've tried to do so much work, but you can't actually solve the issue if you're not addressing the root issue in the beginning, right? And if you're just addressing these symptoms, like you're saying, then how can we ever reach the root? It's like you keep trying to address the symptoms, but the root is still there and not being addressed or even acknowledged, like you're mentioning, where no acknowledgement has been made that menstrual discrimination is a human rights issue, that it is a gender-based violence, is the etiology of that. And so I really like that you mentioned this idea also of, mistaking the discrimination as a cultural value. And I think, maybe Aniedi can add to this is that we have to be able to separate that discrimination is not our culture. It can't be, right? And it also can't be that every single culture globally has the same ideas, which is that menstruation is shameful, menstruation is dirty. And so if every culture has the same idea, then we don't consider that to just be, one specific country's culture. It has to be now a global issue. Thank you so much. Aniedi, if you want to go ahead and hop on, we'd love to hear about how it's going in Nigeria.
All right, thank you, Mili. I can tell you that right from the time of my childhood, menstrual discrimination has been an issue in my community and in Nigeria as a whole. For example, in the neighborhood, everyone was made to to feel like the word menstruation alone is a dirty word. You dare not say it. It was like a taboo. It was like saying that someone is a terrorist, a killer, something like that. So because of this, many girls, even at school, at church, in the neighborhood, in the community, were using euphemisms to replace the word menstruation, because you would feel ashamed to say menstruation. I'm menstruating. So instead of that, you use euphemisms such as the moon, that's in the local dialect, and then the flower, I am on my flower now, I am seeing my moon now, instead of menstruation. And because these girls, majority of us were not given a safe space to talk about menstruation openly. Many of these girls fell prey to teenage pregnancy because this couldn't have been the case if they had a safe space, if they had the confidence and the freedom to talk about these things. Then they would have learned about sexual and reproductive health. They would have learned about teenage pregnancy. They would have learned about menstrual hygiene management. They would have also learned how to practice safe sex, of course. And then, so that's aside. Even till now, so many women, menstruating women and girls, are not allowed to cook for diverse groups of people. For example, the traditional healers. You dare not cook for them while you're menstruating. You dare not enter their huts. You dare not enter that tent where that native medication, whatever is going on there. Most of the time, you're not even allowed to cook for their patients. That's the people that they're trying to treat, because you dare not look at the huts. You don't touch them. You don't have anything to do with them. So the restrictions, they're very high, because it is believed that when you're a you're a cursed person, you are unclean. So when you get into that space, you're going to ruin the potency of their medicine. So that is just it. And then recently, a study from the WASH group in my state, Akwa Ibom State, came out, and then there was this revelation that there's a particular river here in my state where menstruating women and girls are banned from fetching water, from having their bath there. Even women who have given birth to twins are banned from entering into this river, from accessing this river. You see the restriction there, you see the discrimination there. And because it is believed that the water will dry up should they try it. And then there was another recent study by WaterAid. Yes, WaterAid conducted a study in majority of Nigerian states. Nigeria has a lot of states. 36 states. We have 36 states in Nigeria. So they conducted this research, and then they came out and revealed again that there are so many restrictions against menstruating women and girls that most of these women are looked at people that are cursed, people that the gods have abandoned, and then they are restricted from going to the worship centers. They're even restricted from holding infants, newborn babies. So it is that bad. And unfortunately, in Nigeria, I can tell you that till this time, there are no policies by the government to cater for the welfare of menstruating women and girls. There's no such priority. I can remember in 2021, the then minister, I'm sorry, I want to give you an elaborate situation report here. I hope you don't mind, but I'm almost done. So I remember that in 2021, the then Minister of Women Affairs, she came forward on World Menstrual Hygiene Day and informed the public of the menstrual pad bank that her ministry had established there for women and girls, just to cater for emergency cases, menstrual emergency cases. And then she also encouraged other ministries such as Water Ministry and then Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Youth Service Corps, Parastatal, to follow suit and follow such innovation and ensure that the gap on menstrual discrimination and menstrual hygiene management is closed and that's not enough. It's not enough. Back in 2018, also, a group of young activists in Nigeria sponsored a bill to the National Assembly, a menstrual hygiene bill. And in that bill, it was they were pleading with the leaders to at least subsidize menstrual pads so people can have access to period products, and then so people can the government can also provide free menstrual pads to women and girls, especially from underserved communities, all these low income communities, because these women have the fundamental right to health and well-being. So, and unfortunately, till now, the government has not said anything concerning that very bill. Nobody is saying anything. No one cares. And we would have been looking at the case of New Zealand, which I think in 2021 too, they came up with this policy and implemented it, where women and girls there who cannot afford menstrual pads are given free menstrual products. So you'll see that we have a very huge gap. We have a very long way to go in Nigeria because we do not have these policies. We need strong policies to help women and girls. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniedi. That was wonderful. I think it's so important for us to realize that, these two countries, which are further, by miles, very a long ways from each other, Nigeria versus Nepal, and I'm sure we'll hear from the USA perspective as well soon from Aisha. I think to realize that the culture we're hearing is the same, right? I'm hearing the same themes of shame, of taboo, of, stigma, and of feeling inferior, and not just feeling inferior by the menstruator themselves, but really of the society's values, how it makes up this theme of power construction, right, between the menstruator and the non-menstruator. And I'm also hearing that, that maybe some bills were made in the height of when menstrual advocacy became a little bit popular at that time, but then there's no action being done. So I think that is also common in a lot of our international policies, is that, there will be these big policies like, eliminate gender inequity, but you don't talk about menstruation at all. Or you're talking about eliminate world hunger, but you have all these menstrual restrictions on what someone can eat, what nutritious foods they can have. You want everyone to have clean water, and you have a whole river that is restricted from menstruators. And I think, it's just so astonishing to hear that. And I think we don't often hear about all of these things and put it together in the way that we can see it from a global lens. And that's what we're doing here today. So thank you so much for sharing that. I also just wanted to mention that you said that right from childhood we know that menstruation is a dirty word, and no one wants to be identified as a menstruator, right? And I think for our audience, in Dignified Menstruation, we purposefully say the words like menstruator and non-menstruator because we're trying to build that awareness that menstruation is not a dirty word, that menstruating is not a dirty thing. It is nothing that has those connotations that have been implicated, and we use those words instead of using the euphemisms that we're used to, like period or the moon, or other words to describe this, which in a lot of cultures have many different words. So thank you so much for sharing that. Aisha, how is it going in terms of menstrual discrimination in the US? Please enlighten us.
So thank you so much, Mili. And Aniedi, I am, just like Mili mentioned, I am also so enlightened. And every time I hear about this, I don't know why I'm surprised, I'm disappointed that we all share the same experience globally, this culture of discrimination. But it's always so viscerally surprising to hear how similar these contexts are. As a Nepalese Indian American, I have a unique perspective of not only seeing the discrimination that Samir mentioned, that people who immigrate into the United States brought with them, like that type of discriminatory culture. Not that that is our culture, but just those mindsets that they brought over, but not only seeing that intersecting with the discriminations already present for menstruators in America. I do remember growing up, hearing my mother say, oh, like, we can't go into the kitchen, like, we can't do all these things because we're menstruating, and we can't participate in religious activities or activities that I saw, my brother participating in that I just wasn't allowed to because of things I cannot control. Menstruating is very normal, very healthy, very stigmatized, unfortunately. And I saw the same or similar discriminations in school when people would hide their menstrual products. And like Aniedi mentioned, also in the United States, people would not say menstruation. We would be like, oh yeah, like, it's that time of the month, like just using all these different terminologies instead of utilizing appropriate language, which if we think about it in the context of, like zooming out, if we do have appropriate language, if we do empower people who menstruate and other people with appropriate language, we can help them speak up about other systemic violence and gender-based violence issues, such as assault, such as other types of discrimination. I think that menstrual experience is historically shrouded in stigma and silence, and it definitely reflects broader social inequalities and often intersects with other issues like economic injustice, health inequity, gender-based discrimination. Speaking of economic inequity, I know that the United States, is moving forward in schools in a lot of places to provide free menstrual products, although the aspect of, destigmatizing menstruation is not really spoken about. There's also this thing called the tampon tax, where a lot of, or the pink tax, where a lot of products that are targeted towards people who menstruate and like feminine people that these items are considered luxury instead of being a fundamental right and are taxed more, like it costs more to utilize these products, which further underscores how policy can perpetuate economic barriers and gender inequality and inequity. I think that globally, the challenges are magnified in the context of poverty, conflict, and strict cultural norms, which as we speak about these things, as we absorb them and spread awareness in our individual circles and grassroots movements will help dispel these strict cultural norms and move forward by empowering future generations instead of making them feel ashamed for having some very normal experiences. And there are significant gaps, I think, not only in the individual level, but in policy-wide, nationwide, statewide, global, global levels that we have seen. And policies often fail to embrace the full complexity of menstrual equity, focusing on product access without addressing underlying issues of education, stigma, health, as we've seen from different countries, as well as, a leading nation of the United States. Like it's quite there's room for improvement for sure.
100%. I definitely agree, Aisha. I really like this when you mentioned, this idea of when you saw your brother get to do stuff and gets to see that like that he was never restricted, right? I think again, sort of shedding awareness to the fact that we often observe about menstruation and what it means to menstruate, menstruators and non-menstruators at a very early age, right? At a very early age, we're observing the menstruators in our family, we're observing the menstruators and the non-menstruators also in our family, and we're noticing, even when we don't have the words for, discrimination or human rights violation, we don't have those words yet, but we know in our head and in our heart that something is happening here that I know it's unequal, and I know that I'm the one on the unequal side of it, right? I know I'm getting the short end of the stick, and I don't know exactly what it is. So I think it points to this idea, in our dignified menstruation framework, that we need to have education in the age appropriate level, starting at a very young age, right? Because discrimination starts even before a menstruator is born, right? There's so many policies right now. We know China is having a very big backlash to their one-child policy that they had enacted years ago because there were sex selective abortions happening where people were choosing to selectively abort their female fetuses due to this idea that a non-menstruator holds more power because again, they had seen, right? They had lived their lives and they had seen that this is the truth. And so they then followed that discriminatory value or social belief, and then now are experiencing a huge problem with not having, menstruators in their population because as we know, the menstrual blood is the only blood that comes not from violence, right? It is it is the blood that all of us have to go through in order to be born, in order for our society to keep going. So again, I think is really pointing out that fact that it starts in childhood. And so if discrimination starts even before a menstruator is born, then we need to do so much work to educate our young children and both menstruators and non-menstruators have to be educated so that they know that menstruation is this normal biological phenomenon that you were mentioning and is a powerful thing that is a normal aspect of our human biology and is what keeps our evolution going. I really also just want to point out that I really like that you talked about this intersection with other identities. And I think that's very important. There are lots of bills here in the US right now which are trying to get passed to be able to, be able to get menstrual products, through food stamps, which is our local government or federal government assistance programs. And one problem that I have seen in a lot of policies is that they require the person that's receiving the product to identify as a woman. And I think that is just so problematic in its basis because we know that there are so many different types of menstruators and they can have different gender identities. And so again, if we keep siloing menstrual issues as a feminine issue or a woman issue, then we are missing out on a big populations of menstruators, like trans men, non-gender binary people who are getting even further discriminated, like you were saying. The intersectionalities of their identities are building up. And so in the menstrual movement, if we're really looking for trying to achieve menstrual dignity and human rights, then we have to address every single, different diverse subpopulations within this already marginalized population so that we are not furthering the discrimination. So we're not adding on the layers, so we're not saying, oh, we're doing at least good for these groups of people, but then we're subjugating even more marginalized population to more shame and stigma, more discrimination. So thank you so much for pointing that out. And it blends really well in with our third round. And so I think a lot of our panelists have already mentioned this, but for to set up this context, starting with the Human Rights Declaration of 1948, let's say conservatively that it's been about 76, let's give it 80 years since our these big, highly esteemed international justice organizations have initiated the human rights movement. And since then, we've had other initiatives like the CEDAW, which is the Convention for Elimination for All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. We have, the CRC, the Convention of Child Rights, sorry. We have the recent initiation of the Sustainable Developmental Goals, or the SDGs, which I was referring to earlier when I was talking about this, big goal to have clean water and, eliminate hunger and eliminate gender inequity of 2015. In all of these big endeavors that we've taken, we have never had acknowledgement of menstrual discrimination or this multifaceted impact of menstrual violence on the life cycle, which means like from birth, even before birth, to death of people who menstruate, let alone any solution to this multifaceted issue. And all the while, we keep working on the symptoms of these root issues. And we have big international organizations which allocate resources to smaller organizations, sort of categorically, but we're just all working downstream when we need to be working upstream to figure out how we can resolve the root issue. And so with all of this work that's been done, the UNICEF still estimates right now that a fifth of young women globally are married before their 18th birthday. 12 million girls, menstruators, will marry before the age of 18 every year. That's almost 1 in every 2 seconds. So 1, 2, that's 1 menstruator that's married before the age of 18. We have 1 in 3 women who experience sexual assault or rape in their lifetime, and we are witnessing this ongoing genocide, as I mentioned earlier, in Palestine, Congo, Sudan, and other hidden places where menstruators are even having this extra layer of indignity added to their already, their fight for survival in these times of chaos. And so with that, I ask our panelists, what is this intrinsic connection between menstrual violence and sexual and gender-based violence? And how and where does dignified menstruation fit into this? So just sort of explaining to us, how does this connection happen, especially within the scope of your practice? And how can dignified menstruation fit into this? And why is it integral to the elimination of sexual and gender-based violence? And we'll go ahead and start with Samir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mili, for the question. The interesting connection between the menstrual violence and sexual gender-based violence lies in intersectionality of these forms of discrimination and abuse. Menstrual violence refers to the mistreatment, stigma, and discrimination individuals face due to the menstruation, including cultural taboos, exclusive practices, and negative stereotypes. While sexual and gender-based violence, on the other hand, encompasses various forms of harms such as physical, sexual, psychological abuse that individuals express based on their gender. The interesting condition emerges because menstrual discrimination often serves as a trigger factor for broader form of gender-based violence. These two are connection because menstrual discrimination act like a tiger, bigger gender-based violence source. Firstly, this issue of power. Menstrual discrimination happens because some people think they are better than others based on gender, and this is unequal power makes gender-based violence more likely. Secondly, harmful stereotypes about women and menstruation are kept alive by cultural beliefs and attitude, which can fuel even more gender-based violence by justifying mistreatment. Cultural norms that accept menstruation discrimination might also accept other forms of gender-based violence, making it harder to stop the harmful practices. Menstrual discrimination can also hurt mental health, making people feel bad about themselves and more vulnerable to abuses. It can create barriers to education, jobs for the women and marginalized genders, making them more likely to face different kinds of violences. Lastly, feeling inferior due to the menstrual discrimination can lead to low self-esteem, pushing people towards child marriage and violence. In short, the connection between menstrual and gender-based violence comes from a mix of culture, social, and systemic factors that makes discrimination and abuse more likely to make things better. We need to tackle menstrual discrimination as a key step towards creating a fair society free from violence and gender-based violence society. And as you have also mentioned, how we can incorporate dignified menstruation in this. Dignified menstruation play a vital role in battle against sexual and gender-based violence, addressing the root cause and fostering a more inclusive society. It acts as a beacon of knowledge, ensuring that everyone are well informed about menstruation, ending myths, empowering individuals to change unfair beliefs. By dismantling stigma around menstruation, dignified menstruation contribute to breaking broader social norms that may fuel gender-based violence. Moreover, it actively advocates for self-esteem laws and policies that protect rights and dignity of all individuals, recognizing that addressing menstrual discrimination is in conflict with preventing various forms of violence. And also, we can incorporate dignified menstruation where we still exist. For example, we can implement it at our home. We can implement it all the policies like health policy, child marriage strategy policies. In every policy, we can incorporate dignified menstruation to in all form of violence and the main causes of violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. That was so powerful. I think I really, your statement about that it's both menstrual discrimination is both both the cause and the effect in regards to gender-based violence is really powerful and something that we are not thinking too much about. Even when we build a connection, we're thinking that, menstrual discrimination is coming from gender-based violence. But when we look at what is the root of gender-based violence, a lot of us will, working in this in sexual and reproductive health will mention that the effect of it is gender-based violence, and it comes from like patriarchy and misogyny, but we're not able to name like what is patriarchy, what is misogyny, right? And I think, having that sort of connection made where we're seeing that, misogyny or example of misogyny or how patriarchy manifests itself is menstrual discrimination. And then from that, you get various forms of gender-based violence like rape, sexual assault, child marriage. So I think like seeing that it's not linear, that it's really circular, is really important to our ability to address these root causes. So excellent. And I think that is, your comment about that it's really impacting menstruators' mental health is really important too. Because when we think about menstrual discrimination or the, issues with menstruation, people are often pathologizing menstruation, thinking about medical issues, always thinking, maybe, it's too much cramping, or the stereotypes that we have is that maybe, menstruators get too emotional and they get mood swings and they're irrational. And so again, even the medicalization of menstruation or menstrual issues is always pointing to this idea that, it's the menstruator's fault and it makes the menstruator irrational and unable to work as good as a non-menstruator. But really, the biggest impact is, like you said, on the fact that it impacts menstruators' abilities to make decisions. It impacts menstruators' abilities to make informed decisions and to give consent. So I think, pointing out that part, that the violence is impacting menstruators' self-esteem and their ability to have good decision-making, strategies in their own mind and heart because of this discrimination that they're facing, not that they're just these irrational wild creatures made by God and therefore don't deserve to be in powerful positions because they're not worthy. That is not the truth, right? So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Aniedi, do you want to add on to this? We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mili. So I think that many people are not aware of the fact that all the shame, the taboos, and the restrictions, the deprivation surrounding menstruation are all forms of violence against women. Because when you take a critical evaluation of the United Nations definition of gender-based violence, you are left with one option, and that is to agree to the fact that abuse and violence against women can either be physical or emotional. So when each time, in this case, each time a menstruating person is restricted, is stopped from having access to certain kinds of food or interacting with other people or participating in social activities, that menstruator is experiencing menstrual violence. And then each time a person, a menstruator, is banned from sharing the same roof with other people during menstruation and forced to take shelter in poorly constructed huts, that person, that menstruator, is being deprived of his or her access to shelter, housing, access to water, access to sanitation, and access to safety, and which all of this could have effect on their physical and mental well-being, because now they are being left behind, isolated in these places where they are vulnerable to various kinds of harm, including sexual violence. And then you mentioned how dignified menstruation comes into this and can solve this problem. First of all, I would say that dignified menstruation is a human right and everyone has the right to dignity. So when we are talking about dignified menstruation, we are talking about equal access, equality, equal access to resources. We're talking about the welfare of menstruators from the time of their menstruation to the time of menopause, and all the policies to be strengthened and scaled up so that we can protect menstruators because dignified menstruation is about equality, power balance, acceptance. So this is how we can use dignified menstruation to end sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you.
Powerful, Nidhi, when you said, if you look at the UN's definition of violence and of human rights violation, and you think about menstrual discrimination, you're only left with one choice. That was so powerful. It gave me chills. I think all of us should refer to that thinking when we are debating somebody on whether menstrual discrimination is a human rights violation. I will now refer to your statement, because that is so powerful and it's true, right? You've described it already for us so beautifully, that if you look at that definition, all of those violations are made. All of those violations are happening every single time. And I like that you mentioned that. It's not just one time that we are violated against and that menstruators go through some sort of shame and stigma, but every single time that someone loses their mobility, someone loses their ability to access the foods that they want to eat, the people that they want to be around, the shelter in their homes, all of these every single time is a human rights violation, and then further, subjugates this person to those physical and mental indignities, which then impact their quality of their lives and their status in society. So incredible. That was quite powerful. I hope we can all move forward, take on that degree of authority when we can say that no, menstrual discrimination is a human rights violation, and I can prove that to you. I can show it to you using the definition of the same entities that refuse to acknowledge us. We can use their same definitions to show them how wrong they are and how they must rectify this. Beautiful. Anisha, please go ahead and ask to this. Aisha? Oh,
I'm
there we
sorry,
go.
I had to unmute my.
No, that's okay. No worries. I thought there was a technical difficulty. I couldn't hear myself. Go ahead.
Menstrual violence is definitely an often overlooked aspect of gender-based violence, although it is so intrinsically connected through the shared roots of gender inequality and discrimination. This form of violence manifests in shame, stigma, and silence surrounding menstruation, as well as in the physical and emotional harm caused by inadequate access to menstrual health care and education. It might not be an outright act of violence, but it is definitely um, so quietly violent, I want to say. I mean, although it is so loud in our spaces and so loud in our lives, it is definitely so um, tied in, so woven into the network of our lives, to our very being currently in our cultural norms. I have seen this definitely lower the experiences of already indignified people and people facing injustice. For example, my work with the or the unhoused population. I've seen that people who menstruate and people who are of historically marginalized backgrounds are oftentimes targeted when they are unhoused to be sexually trafficked or to be, to experience higher levels of sexual violence, whether that be in the form of rape, assault, or trafficking, or whether that be in being further indignified and have their experience further violated, not only by being unhoused and lacking food, housing security, food security, and all those things, but also through the additional layer of being indignified and not having appropriate um, menstrual hygiene areas, like access to water, access to access to pads, tampons, etc. It is the menstrual discrimination, as you mentioned, is both a cause and effect of broader gender-based violence. Like, because they were menstruating, they were targeted, they were menstruators and historically marginalized groups, they were targeted for sexual violence. But sexual violence is being targeted for these violent activities as well. So it's so tied in, it perpetuates harmful stereotypes and It makes it normal to marginalize people, disempower people, leading to further cycles of violence in silence. Um, like I said, for instance, the inability to manage menstruation with dignity. And this affects education, health, participation in life, whether you are unhoused, whether you are going to school and unable to go to school because of menstruation, and because you are unable to voice that to, for example, your professors, your teachers. It definitely restricts these people from participating in life, and which is a form of violence. You're taking away the right of somebody, the human right of somebody to live thoroughly, to thrive. And it reinforces gender disparities and limits opportunities all around.
100%. I definitely think I really like this part where you said, it's very loud in our lives in terms of the menstruators because we have to think about this every single day of our lives, the rest of our lives, whereas it's very silent in society, right? So I think, it brings me back to that, not just these ongoing genocides in the moment, but even thinking about the corona pandemic, right? Over 60%, I think it's 65 or 70 actually, but let's say over 60% of the healthcare workers globally are menstruators. However, when they first came up with the PPP gear, which is the protective, personal protective equipment, which can mean like the hazmat suits or whatever else that the healthcare teams were using to deal with coronavirus, especially when it first came out, they actually did not, the people who designed it or the people who decided, yes, this is a good thing to protect us from corona, did not think about menstruation, did not think about how people, these healthcare workers who are our menstruators, are going to need to dispose of their menstrual products, are going to need to empty their cups, are going to need to change their menstrual products. And so here somebody might say, oh, the problem was the product, or the problem was a product malfunction, and think, oh yeah, that's just like, somebody who was not a menstruator was designing it, so it was a simple mistake. But I don't think so. I challenge that. I say that how can you as a medical personnel, when designing protective equipment for a majority menstruator population, not think about menstruation? And again, there comes that idea of it being so loud in our lives of menstruators because the burden is always put on us in order to address these gaps and these menstrual discriminations. Whereas, the people in charge or somebody in those higher up social groups which were deciding this have to think about that. It is, their duty to think about this. It is not just something that, menstruators are going to be the only ones to bring it up. It has to be embedded in society. And that dignified menstruation, like you mentioned, does that, right? So the idea of if this framework is, implemented in different aspects of society, from our government layers to the private companies to menstrual product companies or the media company, when we implement dignified menstruation into the societal frameworks, then it works better than us just putting the burden on menstruators. Because as we see, we've always thought about this, but it hasn't, resolved anything because we haven't been able to get the structural infrastructure support. So thank you for that. I think leading from that, we'll have our last round of questions. And that is if you could leave us with some key actions that you and others can implement going forward to eliminate menstrual, sexual, and gender-based violence. And please speak a little bit about, the individual versus the school community level versus the government level. And you can also specify it to the scope of your work. So we'll start first with Samir. And Samir, please tell us about some specific steps that non-menstruators should be taking to address menstrual discrimination and this rising violence against menstruators. How can they start to incorporate dignified menstruation?
Okay, thank you, Mili, for the question. As being a non-menstruator, at first we have to understand menstruation is our responsibility. Dignified menstruation is everyone's business. So we have to know about the menstruation. beginning being a champion of menstruation, dignified menstruation, at first we have to know about the menstruation, understand both biology, pathology, anatomy of the menstruation, so we can elaborate about the menstruation in the community openly and have created a safe space. So, and also another thing, at first we have to raise the question, while anyone practices the menstrual discrimination in their community, in their society, is a culture. Why and what and how? This is the, and then after that, we have to end all form of violence that exists in our own home. Because being a non-menstruator, for example, I am a non-menstruator. If I support my mother to practice the menstruation, then it will continuously go as a tradition, as a culture. So at first, I have to raise the question with my mother, with the menstruator who exists in our family. Then after, we have to end all forms of menstrual violence at our family and create a safe space. Because in context of Nepal, National Women Commission has released a report. In that report, around 100, there are 92 cases that exist in our home about violence. And among 92, 83 are performed by our own. So we have to make a safer place in our home. Then after, we have to do advocacy at society, school. School is one of the major place where we get the education. So we have to advocacy in local government to incorporate dignified menstruation as a curriculum in the textbooks. So it will be a big platform to make people regarding the menstruation is our everyone business. We are born from menstruation. Menstrual blood is clean, and menstruation is the dignified menstruation is a dialogue that needed for the protection of human rights. So at first we have to do in school, then after in local government or national level, we have to do the advocacy for the policy. In context of Nepal, we have a dignified menstruation policy in 2074, but it is completely not implicated all over the Nepal. So we have to do the advocacy in every level for the implication of the policy, and also if another policy come with violent the human that we have to do the advocacy on that also. So and we can rise workshop, we can do advocacy organization, homes, schools, everywhere we are still exist. So we can do advocacy. And another thing, we have much more powerful media, that is social media. We can do, we can write about menstruation, we can make a video regarding the menstruation, we can make poster, flyers, information regarding the menstruation, and we can post on social media, because it is the biggest platform from where we can give the message, we can motivate people, and also we can gather mass to show that menstruation is everyone's business. So we can use that one. And also all the menstruators are requested that we are born from the menstrual blood of our mothers. We are born from the menstrual blood. So it's our responsibility, it's our duty, and it's the responsibility of being a citizen of the country, following the constitution, being a member of human rights. So we have everyone responsibility to make the menstrual dignity. It's a part of responsibility, it's a part of duty, it's a part of being the two sides of coin, is being a male and female. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Samir. I think it's so powerful for you to, state that this is our responsibility and our duty, right? And I think as a non-menstruator, that's powerful as well, because we know that, we have this unequal sort of power dynamic and unequal social dynamic. So when non-menstruators are also taking on that responsibility, are, highlighting the work of menstruators and being the champions and, showing your respect and your alignment to this human duty as a human being and a citizen of this globe is very important. And I just want to again, sort of share or push this idea that you're sharing, which is to normalize menstruation, to learn about it as a non-menstruator, so that you know what is medical and biological facts and community knowledge, and so that you can stop pushing the stereotypes that you have learned, because it is not your fault that you don't know because of how society is. But now that you know that there's an issue, you have to pick up that duty, and you have to say, I was not taught this, or I was taught something wrong, and now I need to unlearn it. I need to, learn the good things, the positive things, and then push that awareness out to teach my brothers, to teach other non-menstruators, so that we can all be in the same page and champion for dignified menstruation. Thank you so much, Samir. Aniedi, how would you like to add to this?
Okay, so thank you, Mili. Personally, I believe that the message of dignified menstruation can yield more positive results around the world through intensive awareness programs. For instance, during my time at the Dignified Menstruation Fellowship, I had to learn, unlearn, and relearn a lot about dignified menstruation and the approach to which the holistic approach that dignified menstruation focuses on, not just about the menstrual product, not just about hygiene, but about the physical and the emotional part when it comes to the emotional aspect when it comes to menstruation and menstruating people. So with this kind of learning, with this kind of information, where everyone is supposed to know that menstrual equity is important. The power balance is important to make everybody acceptable and make everybody feel equal. Now, this is the message I am incorporating into my work, because before it was just about hygiene. But we have come to know that there are various practices that exposes menstruators to different kinds of violence. And so now my work is dignity first, which is what dignified menstruation is all about. And I am currently looking at strategic collaboration with relevant stakeholders such as community leaders, native healers, and then Ministry of Education, and then even the youth, so that we can all come together and see how we can strategize and then spread this message across, because awareness is very important, where we can take it to schools, take it to communities, and even in church, so that we can just spread the message and then have significant results at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniedi. Wow, so powerful. I think it's so important that other organizers and organizations hear us when we say that you doing the work on in menstrual products and hygiene was good because that's what you knew, right? And then after you learned, and after we also learned, right? Even us as a part of Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation and the Radha Paudel Foundation, we also have learned this through practice that, hey, something is missing, right? Before we were only told, and mostly it was led by the Global North movement, right? Was the idea that products is what you're missing, hygiene is what you're missing. But actually, in our community knowledge, we did actually know a lot of those things. We knew that we had to, be hygienic, and that we have to keep ourselves healthy. But we also have learned throughout this, this last 2 decades or 3 decades, is that menstrual blood is not inherently unhygienic. It's not dirty blood, right? It is just blood, the same as if I would bleed if I just cut my hand, the same blood that feeds children if we choose to be pregnant. And I think that's so important and so powerful. What you said is that now you're incorporating it into your practice. We don't tell anyone that you have to stop what you're doing or what you're doing is wrong. We just always learn, and then we rectify what we did not know before, and then we move forward. And the work that you're doing is so important in whatever local, regional or national level you're working on. And this is to all our audience. When we ask you to collaborate and to include dignity, is to expand the work, is not to restrict the work. It is to only expand so that you reach a wider audience, and so that you can actually address the root issues in that community. And then, like you said, Aniedi, you will see the changes in the mental and in the physical as well, but in the mental, spiritual being of that person, when you start to, tell them things that allow them to self-empower themselves, right? This idea of self-empowerment, of dignity, of feeling that dignity. And I really like that you mentioned that you had to unlearn so many things. And I think that's something that we find sometimes a challenge, is when we don't want to unlearn, or we think we have, done so much work already, that how can it be that now I'm changing what I'm doing? But that is the beauty of evolution. And I don't think that us as Global South, Dignified Menstruation, will ever stop evolving. I am sure that 10 years from now, 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, oh, we should do more of this to even expand our inclusion even more, right? We're always going to want to evolve and to be better. So thank you so much for that. Incredibly powerful, and I encourage everyone to check out our next round of fellowships when they open up. Please visit our website www.dignifiedmenstruation.org to be on the notification list and to be on our monthly newsletter so you can hear more about the program. You can even contact Aniedi and speak about her experiences if you would like to know more. So thank you so much, Aniedi. Aisha, please bring us home.
Thank you. I would like to leave everybody with the idea that to eliminate menstrual, sexual, and gender-based violence, we need actions across all levels, as we've heard. Individuals, as well as communities, schools, and governments can start by educating themselves and advocating for change using inclusive language, like you had mentioned earlier in certain policies for food stamps and attaining menstrual aid. The language is very, very divisive, very discriminatory. So one great step that we can do is to educate ourselves on using inclusive language, such as menstruators instead of simply women. Educating ourselves in the framework of dignified menstruation and seeing how everything is interconnected, how dignity in menstruation and that type of discrimination is a stepping stone in the larger framework of sexual violence, of assault, of discrimination in a broader scale, for example, the PPE and so many other discriminatory practices, where communities can engage in open discussions to destigmatize menstruation, to destigmatize these bad words, and make them more normalized so that people and menstruators and historically marginalized groups have the language and have the mental framework and the are empowered to be able to speak on their experiences without fear, without the stigma. And we can better support survivors of gender-based violence of all types. Through informed policies, I really believe that informed policies, comprehensive education, and a commitment to justice, equality, and equity, we can address these interconnected issues and move towards a world where every individual's dignity is recognized, and not only recognized, but upheld and propelled forward. Thank you.
100%. Thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you for leaving us with a really positive message that we can do this if we continue to, one, commit to this equity and this justice and to commit to moving forward. That's kind of lens that we want to move in our personal, interpersonal relationships and within ourselves, and also in our professional work and in our community level work. So as we come to these final moments here, I want to extend my deepest gratitude for all the panelists, organizers, and audience for your contributions and support for this fantastic, invigorating panel to take place. I imagine that today's conversations has sparked our radical imagination and ignited a fire for urgent action now for all of those. I urge you all to visit us in our websites and Instagram and to be in connection with us. And to conclude, just want to remind us that the Dignified Menstruation Framework is one that is multidimensional and transformative, not only for menstrual equity and justice, but for complete understanding of menstrual discrimination's origin in patriarchy and the sequelae of the socio-health consequences. This is a movement of resistance, the fourth wave of feminism, and I want to have us end this event with a couple of words from our founder of Dignified Menstruation and of Global South Coalition, Dignified Menstruation, and the Radha Paudel Foundation. She is our leader and our grassroots organizer who originated this framework and who we all are indebted to this work. So please, Dr. Radha Paudel, I'd like you to take the stage and take us home.
Thank you, Mili. Thank you. You all have done a wonderful job. Congratulations. Despite having wars, disasters, climate change, and gender backlash on equity and equality, we are here. Namaste. Salam alaikum. Good afternoon from the Secretariat Office of Global South Coalition, Kathmandu, Nepal. Thank you very much for following Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, HCSW. It is already 4th year. And today, my role is very easy, observer. And in a 5 years course, I see such a champions as a moderator, as a speaker. It's really, really so nice and so proud of you all. No matter where we are with menstruators in all diversities. And they are experiencing the various form of sexual and gender-based violence is a systemic and symptomatic impact of menstrual discrimination. As Mili highlighted, the menstrual discrimination, it is complex, multifaceted, and as you all agreed, it plays a vital role to construct unequal power relationships since childhood and also reinforce the patriarchy. As all speakers said, the menstrual discrimination has been practicing across the globe in various forms, names, and magnitude. From Nigeria to Nepal, or from north to south, regardless of their religion, region, education, etc. The deep silence and ignorance among us or among the NGOs, academia, activists, donors, media, and governments are the key push factors. More importantly, our homes are not safe, particularly for the menstruators. We need to start from that point. Our conversation should begin from that point. Why do not our homes are safe? I gently remind you all that the menstrual hygiene or menstrual health or menstrual management or period poverty is not enough to address all forms of menstrual discrimination and prevent the sexual and gender-based violence. Our speaker, Etim, highlighted very well, and she challenged the definition of UN on sexual and gender-based violence. If we analyze its menstrual practices at once, more than dozens of human rights are violating simultaneously. Who are calculating for that cost? And how do the people at CSW at New York right now, I'm talking about sexual and gender-based violence without talking about the menstrual discrimination. It's really same. I also like to remind you all that the current framework of sexual and reproductive health rights or climate justice also cannot address the inequity, marginalization, and smash the patriarchy. Likewise, without addressing menstrual discrimination, we cannot eliminate the sexual violence or child marriage or rape or intimate partner violence and so on. Therefore, I would like to request each of you to incorporate dignified menstruation and its indicators wherever you are, whatever capacity you have. No need to wait for the project. We need a project. It will be easier. But if you are really committed for making your home dignified, your school dignified, you have to start right now. Don't do it. I congratulate to all speakers who are doing great work at their ground for advocating dignified menstruation and committed to continue our efforts in days to come. Menstrual discrimination is not a culture, is not for a religion or ethnicity or country. It is everywhere. So let's work together to make dignified menstruation friendly home, school, community, workplace, parliament, and everywhere and every moment. We don't have excuses because we cannot imagine the place without the menstruators. No matter where we are, either in ICU of pandemic or tsunami or flood or earthquake or any place. Let's talk, and talk on menstrual dignity to smash the patriarchy. Let's invest on menstrual dignity, accelerate the progress. Let's incorporate menstrual dignity as a cross-cutting issue across all sectors and levels for not leaving no one behind. Let's, at last but not least, let's change our narratives. Let's call menstruation or menstruators instead of the gender. If we start to think gender, we miss the huge chunk of the population of this planet who have a uterus and ovaries and who have been struggling a lot every day in their life. So if you are really working for the equality, let's change our narratives. Let's replace the gender by the menstruation. And let's say menstruation equality, not the gender equality. If we are ready for changing that narratives, I think we can make this planet more safe, more dignified, more justful, and prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Radha. Powerful, powerful speech is always invigorating the fire within us. And I invite all of our audience to engage with us outside of this NGO CSW platform, so you can continue to hear more, to be empowered, and to have the necessary tools so that you can continue this work or initiate this work wherever you are and whatever work you are doing or will start with this. Thank you so much, everyone. We have exceeded our time. So just looking at the chat, I do see a lot of numbers being shared. Please, email us at the email that we have listed there if you are interested to work. We also have our WhatsApp group, so please don't be afraid to engage with us. And unless there's any burning questions, we will go ahead and end this webinar today. And I just have one comment that just came in. How wonderful, wonderful speech, Radha madam. Huge congratulations. And honestly, even for me, as someone who started the Global South Coalition Dignified Menstruation with Dr. Radha Paudel, seeing the growth of this and the growth of the Dignified Menstruation movement is truly inspiring. And the fact that the globe now knows what dignified menstruation is a testament to all of your work and all of the work that our wonderful GSCDM fellows have done and advocates have done. So please join us in this fight. Thank you so much, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye.